All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Millennials Are Old podcast. And you know what, Brian? I've been thinking, right? We just had Scott on the show. We, of course, reviewed the legendary Terminator Dark Fate. And I really wanted to review another just great kick-ass fucking action movie. You know, Brian, you and I both love Nick Cage, right? He's just a phenomenal actor, of course, Academy Award-winning actor. Now he's a bit of a meme, unfortunately. But I had heard that there was a John Wick-style movie with Nick Cage starring a pig. And I was like, what the fuck? I need to see this. And I watched it, and you know what? It's just about fucking emotions. I was like, what the fuck is this bullshit?
So not to get too ahead of it, but yeah, was this movie presented for a long time to you as an action film? Because I feel like it's how it was presented to me.
Yeah, no, I was just like, there's this badass Nick Cage movie with a pig, and then it's like about, oh, I'm sad. Like, what the fuck is this bullshit? I was so mad. I almost threw my fucking remote at my TV, and I was like, this is fucking gay.
Yeah, I almost said the G word about it. Yeah. I had flashbacks to 2005, and I wanted to say the G word. I thought it was really G-worded.
Me too. And it was also very R-worded too. I was like, I was screaming. I had my Bud Light in my hand, but actually I didn't have my Bud Light in my hand because I can't drink Bud Light anymore, Brian. You know how I feel about Bud Light.
Due to a court order.
I was drinking what is that beer called? The like right-wing beer? I can't
Black Label.
Something.
Well, that's a coffee. That's a coffee. I'm sorry.
No, I think it's Black Rifle. That's it.
Black Rifle. Black Label. I'm so fucking R-worded.
But yes, with this out of the way, you know what? Let's just fucking review Pig already, all right? So let's just get this shit over with because I already watched a goddamn movie. I can't go back. But yes, so we're reviewing the 2021 Nick Cage movie Pig. Now, this was my choice for this week's episode. Brian, what did you know about Pig before I recommended it for this week's episode?
Very highly regarded in my social circle. I had known about it, pretty much since it got announced. Of course, I go see a lot of movies. Nick Cage is someone who is more or less on my radar. I have a general interest in whatever he's got coming out. Everyone told me, see Pig. It's great. It's a great movie. And I was sure that it was, but it just it got past me. That just happens sometimes. I trusted all of my friends saying it was great, that I would love it, but I just missed it on theatrical run. I do, however, have a brief story to tell about the first time I saw a pig trailer.
Oh, like an actual pig?
No, a trailer for this film. So I don't remember what movie we were seeing. This is probably earlier 2021, maybe even 2020. It was one of my first theater experiences post-COVID. So it was one of the first, when trailers first started creeping out for Pig. And in the first few, it was a brief trailer and it was very vague. And so I thought to myself, because I'm extremely R-worded, this is an Americanized remake of The Wedding Trough starring Nick Cage. And I insisted to my friend group, I kept saying, I think this movie is an American remake of The Wedding Trough. And they kept saying, no, it's not. This is not a remake of The Wedding Trough. And I'm not kidding. And I said, for probably about a week, I went up to people and I said, I'm pretty sure that new Nick Cage movie is a remake of The Wedding Trough. And they're just not announcing it because they want it to be shocking. Do you know about The Wedding Trough?
I'm not familiar at all. No, actually.
Wedding Trough is a 1970s avant-garde kind of horror psychological, like an avant-garde movie, where a guy with some sort of mental or emotional problems who lives on a farm, secluded from society, fucks a pig, and then the pig gives birth to humanoid pig children who he then has to murder. And this is like an acclaimed but very controversial art house film. But I, for whatever reason in my head, because it was a short trailer and it just showed Nicolas Cage going like, "That's my pig." And it's like, I need my pig. I haven't seen anyone in years. And I was so sure that this was a remake of The Wedding Trough. And I was telling people that. I was insistent upon it for probably about a week.
Well, you know what? There's actually a piece of dialogue in this movie that may actually have alluded to the original idea of that.
Well, I almost kind of wonder, actually, that line, I think they put in just because they knew people were going to say that. People were going to be like, does he fuck the pig?
Yeah, that is absolutely hilarious. I had never heard of this movie before, and I would have, even if I had seen this movie, I would have never guessed in a million years that's what this movie would have been about. I'll be honest with you.
Only when I saw the trailer, but for some reason I was so sure of it. No, I thought I was so clever, and I was like, I'm so media savvy. I know this is going to be a remake of The Wedding Trough, and none of my normie friends are seeing the writing on the wall.
I mean, knowing Nick Cage, if he would have completely produced this movie, he might have actually done that, to be honest with you.
Right. Yes.
But yeah, so I want to get into a little bit of my motivations for why I chose this movie, because it's the exact opposite for me. So I remember seeing a trailer for this movie, probably mid to early 2021, I want to say. And it was getting memed on. They're like, oh, Nick Cage is looking for his pig or whatever. Like, and I had heard from people that it was supposed to be John Wick, but with a pig and with like Nick Cage in it. And I'd heard that over and over again. And I was going to see the movie no matter what, because I was doing a Nick Cage movie podcast at the time. I've seen most of Nick Cage's movies at this point. I'm like, I'm going to fucking see this pig movie. And I had seen on Rotten Tomatoes maybe a couple weeks before this movie came out, it just got insanely positive reviews. Like, we'll get into some of the really positive reviews, but this is Nick Cage's second highest overall rating on Rotten Tomatoes for any movie he's ever done. Like, this is an extremely critically acclaimed movie. So when I saw that, I was like, holy shit, what could this movie possibly be like? And I remember I saw it on opening weekend. I actually have my ticket stub. It was July 17th of 2021, the Saturday opening weekend. I was coming back from Chicago, probably going to the arcade or something, I don't remember, Galloping Ghost Arcade in Brookfield, Illinois, for all the real heads out there who know me. And I went up to a Marcus, just a little bit south of here, and I went to, I think it was like an 11 o'clock screening or something like that, so pretty late on a Saturday night. And I'm like, all right, I'm really excited to see this movie. And I shit you not, I was literally the only person at this screening. I looked.
That's so awesome when you get to see a movie that way, though.
And honestly, so, I mean, we'll get into it, obviously, when we get into the plot synopsis, but that's literally the perfect way to see this movie, is in a giant room with just darkness and nobody around. Like, I'm being dead serious. That is the best way to watch the fucking movie. And I actually did see it a couple weeks later with my mom when she came to visit. And it was still a small screening, but there weren't that many people, maybe like 10 to 12 people, I want to say. And it didn't diminish the experience really much at all. But yeah, this is definitely a movie that you see fucking alone in the dark. Like, it just really is.
Yeah,
and
well, because the whole movie, the whole ambiance of it is about like empty spaces, right? And like silence.
Yeah, exactly. Good Lord. And also another reason I wanted to review this movie, so we're just going to get this out of the way. This movie was shot in Portland, Oregon, and there's a lot of real life locations in Portland that they use, of course, for this movie that are very recognizable features that I'm sure we'll get into in the synopsis and stuff like that. But I was like, oh shit, I know somebody who hosts this podcast with me who might know a little bit about Portland. So I wanted to do that. And then I found out maybe a couple months later when Red Letter Media reviewed this, and the director himself actually posted a comment on the Red Letter Media video about this review, and he said he was from Milwaukee. And I was like, oh shit, let me look this up real quick. And yeah, turns out he's from the Milwaukee area. Movie was shot in Portland, a critically acclaimed Nick Cage movie. I'm like, this is literally the perfect movie for this podcast. We have to review this movie someday. Like, holy shit.
Yeah.
But yeah, so just to get my feelings out of the way, I love this movie. I think this movie is absolutely phenomenal. And this is actually the fourth time I've seen this movie now. Yeah, no, I have went ham on this movie, no pun intended. But yeah, so let's get into some details real quick here. So as I mentioned earlier, this movie came out in 2021. I believe it premiered on July 16th of 2021. It was rated R, which this movie could have been a PG-13, but there's just a little bit too much hard edgeness and a little too much swearing. Yeah. But this movie's not like violent at all. Like, when people say this is John Wick with a pig, that's not what this movie is at fucking all. It couldn't be less like that if it tried.
Yeah, I don't think I heard people say that, but I did kind of hear people present this as an action film, and I'm not really sure why.
And it's not very action-packed. I'll just say that.
No.
It's a drama. It's essentially a drama film.
Yeah.
But a very well-made one, obviously. Incredibly well-made. And the Milwaukee connection here. So this movie was directed by Michael Sarnowski, who, as I mentioned earlier, is from Wisconsin. And I'm not going to get into how I know that, but I'll just say I might have a little bit more of a connection to Michael Sarnowski than a lot of other people that have reviewed this movie. I'm just going to say that. Just going to leave that up in the air. Yeah.
You're lovers.
We were lovers, yes, in a separate life.
Sorry, I shouldn't bring it up on the air.
Yeah. You know what, Michael? If you're ever back in town, call me up, man. Trust me. We can make this happen, okay? And this movie was written by Vanessa Block and Michael Sarnowski once again. And Vanessa Block is actually one of Michael Sarnowski's frequent collaborators. They actually directed and produced a movie called The Testimony, which was a documentary about, I think, various war crimes in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And it actually got nominated for an Academy Award, but it didn't go through. Or I think it was on the short list for a nomination. It was something like that. But either way, a very highly critically acclaimed short documentary. But this is actually Michael Sarnowski and Vanessa Block's very first feature film, which is amazing to me because, like, this movie is incredibly well crafted in pretty much every single way. It's crazy that this is a directorial debut.
the pacing in this is next level.
Yeah, God, abso-fucking-lutely. And this movie was produced by a trillion people, so I'm not going to go over all of them, but I will go over that this movie was partially produced by Nicolas Cage himself and Steve Tisch, Steve Tisch is an American film producer and businessman who has just a million credits, and he's also the co-owner and executive VP of the New York Giants, which I thought was very interesting. I'm like, interesting. I wonder how he got involved in this, but either way, whatever. But yeah, so Nicolas Cage is one of the producers, and actually one of his production companies, Saturn Films, is actually listed on the intro production credits at the beginning of the movie. And as I mentioned earlier, this is Michael Sarnowski's very first feature film. He directed, of course, The Testimonies I mentioned earlier, and he's also directing the new Quiet Place movie that's coming out this year. I think it's like a prequel to the Quiet Place movies, if you're familiar
I
with
thought
that
The
series.
Quiet Place was so boring, to be honest.
Honestly, I would like to see if he has full control, which I doubt he does, because Quiet Place is like a fairly big IP. But if he has like full control, I would love to see his version of A Quiet Place, because I think it actually could be very interesting.
I mean, I'm gonna see it no matter what. I thought that the first Quiet Place film, I didn't understand, like, it's well made, but I thought it was so dull.
Isn't it kind of like Bird Box a little bit, but a little bit different? Isn't it like instead of seeing, it's like audio, or am I thinking of something different?
I actually have not seen Bird Box. I know what you mean. Like, I know enough about it. But yeah, it's about like a creature thing about like having to be quiet so you aren't discovered. I don't know. I didn't like it, really.
Fair.
I thought it was boring.
That's totally fair. I have not seen it myself either, and I probably won't, but I will say, though, I probably will see A Quiet Place day one. I probably will, just because I love this movie so much. And I think that if Michael Sarnowski actually has the power over this film that he should, I think it could be great.
That's definitely interesting that the guy who made Pig is doing a Quiet Place film, just because I'm going to see that just out of curiosity to see what he does with it.
No, absolutely. And then, of course, we mentioned earlier, so Nick Cage, obviously very legendary actor, of course, producer on this film. He's produced a lot of movies with his production company, Saturn Films, Academy Award-winning actor, producer, director, etc. He's also worked on some TV shows, and he directed one movie, I know that. And I can tell you what, Brian, that movie was fucking terrible. That movie was so bad.
Yeah?
If you've ever wanted to see James Franco be the worst juggalo of all time, not juggalo, gigolo of all time. He's a gigolo in that movie.
Oh.
I'm joking. He's not a juggalo. I misspoke. But he's a gigolo male prostitute in that movie. And Nick Cage plays like he has like just a cameo role, but he plays like just a mad pimp who just like attacks James Franco's character with a samurai sword. It's a bizarre movie. It's not good.
I mean, that is making it sound pretty cool.
Honestly, I wish it was, but it is so unbelievably boring. It is so unbelievably boring, except for that one scene.
Can't win them all.
No, you really can't, Jesus. And then speaking of you can't win them all, so this movie is 92 minutes long, and another trivia fact I have here is this movie was originally supposed to be 2.5 hours long, which, once again, I love this movie, but this is a perfect 92-minute movie. This did not need to be 2.5 hours long. Thank God that didn't happen. That would have been exhausting.
I like this movie. It's very effective. It's very emotionally effective. The plot of it is actually pretty scant, and I think that's for the best. So I can't imagine it being much longer than it is.
Yeah, Jesus. What would they have done? Like put in fucking flashbacks or something that would have just like completely negated the impact of this movie?
30 minutes of flashbacks of like montages of him hanging out with the pig.
Yeah, just God, like, yeah, 2.5 hours, this movie would have been pretty unbearable at 2.5 hours, I'll be honest with you. Like, 92 minutes is just perfect for this movie. It doesn't need to be a minute or two shorter or longer. And then I wasn't able to find a budget for this movie, but I found a rough estimate of roughly about $3 to $5 million. And it grossed only $4 million, which isn't very surprising. This is, pretty independent film. Nick Cage's salary was actually about half of the budget of the movie. So it's a pretty small budget movie.
Yeah, that's a small budget, which makes sense for the type of film this is. I'm surprised that it grossed so small because I feel like everyone I know saw this movie except for me. And granted, my friends are like nerds who are into like subculture shit and whatever, but I feel like a lot of people I know saw this movie and were really jazzed about it when it came out. So that's surprising. I thought it was kind of a big hit for how low budget it was.
I think it was a big hit, and of course, critically, it was a big hit. But I think it was a big hit in just the idea of like, oh, Nick Cage is back and he's in good movies again or whatever, even though he had been in many good movies prior to this, obviously. But I would say this was kind of like the cementing of Nick Cage's like renaissance. So I think that's probably why a lot of people thought it was a bigger movie. But like I said, I saw this opening weekend and I was literally the only person in the entire movie theater, like just straight up. I was literally the only person in this damn screening. And I'm like, where the fuck is everybody? And I know it was a late screening, but still, I was like, there's not another fucking person who wants to see this movie? Like, what the fuck?
Opening weekend? Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, and I actually watched an interview with Michael Sarnoski earlier, and he mentioned that there were torrents of this movie like up on like the day this movie came out. So there must have been like some interference with like either theater
Some
workers
breach.
or something, some breach or something like that. So that might have also affected it. But also, you know, it's mid 2021. People aren't really going to the theaters in mid 2021. Like even movies that were like big movies that came out that year, like there might have been 10 people in a screening on like a Tuesday when it was $5 even. Like
For like a Marvel movie. Yeah.
Yeah, like people just were not going to the movies at that time, and they certainly were not willing to risk their lives, unless you're crazy people like me, to risk their lives going to a fucking Nick Cage weird emotional film. You know what I mean? But yeah, so this movie unfortunately did not gross a lot of money, but once again, very critically acclaimed. This clearly led to Michael Sarnoski being an actual player in Hollywood to a certain extent, because at least he's directing a fucking big budget movie coming up. So hey, that's something going on for him. And then we were talking about critically acclaimed. So this movie has a 97% on Rotten Tomatoes critic score and an 84% audience score. And I mentioned earlier, this movie is actually tied with Into the Spider-Verse as being Nick Cage's second highest ranked movie on RT. And for a long time, it was actually ranked number one, tied with Spider-Verse, but there was a movie that came out in the 90s called Red Rock West that recently got an extra positive review on Rotten Tomatoes, which increased it to number one, which I know I mentioned that movie to you, Brian. You've not seen Red Rock West,
I have not.
right?
I have not.
Oh my God. It is a neo-Western with Nick Cage and Dennis Hopper. Dude, you would love that movie. It is great. Like,
That sounds fucking cool. Who directed that?
It was some random guy I'd never heard of. Probably like a TV director or something like that, I want to say. He was not like a very prominent person.
Interesting. That sounds kind of up my alley. Just what you said, a little bit you said.
Yeah, I'm looking at his film credits. It's a guy by the name of John Dahl. Nothing
Taylor,
really.
you can probably guess what my favorite Nick Cage movie is.
Is it Face Off?
No.
Is it Raising Arizona?
It is Wild at Heart.
Ooh, okay. I have actually not seen Wild at Heart. That was a movie.
What?
I know, but listen, that was a movie that was coming up on the docket for Cage Fight, and we just didn't get around to it, unfortunately.
Hey, I don't know if we'll have time. We can do it as a Valentine's Day, as a February.
Ooh, that's a great idea. Let's keep that around. But yeah, so once again, this is a very critically acclaimed movie, and if you look at it just from an objective perspective, this is easily like one of Nick Cage's best movies, and it's my personal favorite Nick Cage movie. Like, I just fucking love this movie in every single aspect. Like, I think it's perfectly crafted for the kind of movie that it is. And I was doing a little bit of research. Like I said, I read that interview earlier, and it was really kind of like perfect. It was like lightning in a bottle. Like, this movie could have just turned out to just be kind of meh, okay, maybe a movie kind of people, like some people just talked about, but like everything kind of came together to make this movie the way that it was. Like, one of the main characters in this movie, and we'll get to him obviously in the synopsis, but one of the main characters literally signed onto this movie like 2 days before they started shooting the scenes with this actor. Like, that's how close it was to not being the masterpiece that it is. Like, it's just crazy to think about.
Yeah, like you said, objectively, this is like a masterclass film. It is crazy that this is a directorial debut. I almost have a hard time saying anything because I have thoughts about this movie that are kind of, they're not complicated. They're specific. They're my personal takes on it. But I feel like I need to undercut all of that by saying this is a great movie. Like, just in structure, in craft, as an emotional like arc with a statement. I want to make that really clear before we even get into like analysis or anything, because anything that I say that is like, I don't even want to call it a criticism, but that is like a thought about the movie, I want that to be like an asterisk next to that just says, but this is a great movie. This is no discredit to the film.
No, absolutely. And then I know we keep talking about this movie, so let's finally get into the synopsis here. So this movie was set in 2019 because that's actually when they shot the movie. It didn't come out till 2021 because, of course, COVID happened. But anyways, movie set in 2019. Robin Robfeld, played by Nick Cage, is a former Portland-based chef turned reclusive truffle forager, which I actually did not know this until I was doing research for this movie again. But apparently Oregon is the #1 state in America for truffle farming. I did not know that.
Truffle is a big thing here. Obviously.
Yeah, there's like an entire, I was looking up like the Oregon, like the forestry people in Oregon, right? And there's like a whole website specifically dedicated just to truffles. And I was like, oh, damn, I had no fucking idea.
any like Portlandy place, like whether it's fast food or it's, I'm sure, like high end fucking shitbox, fuck off restaurants like the kind portrayed in this have a seasonal truffle, but even like burger places here do a seasonal truffle thing. There's a type of guy that loves talking to you about truffle. I mean, it's a thing for sure.
Do they do the truffle shuffle there, or is that something different?
They do that in Wisconsin more, I think. You can't tell, but I got a big mean grin on my face right now.
Well, to be fair, the truffle shuffle was actually invented in Oregon. That is true.
That's a very Oregon-coded movie.
Yes, if we're talking about The Goonies, obviously. The classic film, The Goonies. But yeah, so he lives in a cabin deep in the Oregon forest. He hunts for truffles with the help of his prized foraging pig. And doing some more research, I thought it was very funny. So apparently Michael Sarnowski in a Q&A revealed that the pig only had 3 days of training and bit Nicolas Cage multiple times during filming.
Awesome. I love pigs. I think they're a cool animal. I especially love an ornery pig. That's such a cool fucking creature to put in your movie. It's so funny too that it's such a, like in this beautiful movie, it's like actually the pig was a real asshole.
Yeah.
Nicolas Cage is like, on screen we had great chemistry, but off the set, wow, he was a prima donna.
Yeah, Nick Cage was in an abusive relationship with his pig. Like, I need to get this pig back. It's like Kakihara. Yeah, no other pig bites me like this pig does.
So I was going to say, it's like when you hear stories about like George C. Scott being like an ornery asshole to his co-stars.
Yeah. But I thought that was very funny. And yeah, bit Nick Cage on multiple occasions, but the pig is barely in this movie, and probably for the best, because if they had the pig throughout the whole movie, like Nick Cage's actual wounds in the movie would be real. It wouldn't be like set dressing.
So I want to tell you a story, and I don't know at what point what they were filming for. I work in downtown Portland. And at one point, and I believe this isn't like a lady that tells, but she's not a storyteller. This lady who I work with lives at a pretty populous, like high-rise hotel and apartment complex in downtown Portland. And she said that there was a moment where she's pretty sure she saw Nick Cage in character, all disheveled, walking into her apartment complex and up the stairs. And at first she was like kind of uncomfortable because she thought he was like a crazed homeless man that was walking in. And then she like kind of like wrote it off. And I don't know if she told someone or what. And then later on, I remember she saw a trailer of her pig and then heard that it was filmed in Portland. And she was like, oh, I think I saw Nick Cage.
In all honesty, that probably did fucking happen, because a lot of this movie is filmed in downtown Portland.
In downtown, yeah, that's near where I work. And there's like things where, I mean, obviously there's allusions to Pioneer Square. Not allusions. I mean, they talk about Pioneer Square and things, There's some stuff in this movie that I, as a transplant, am not really equipped to speak to. But I think there is something about what Portland specifically has gone through in the last 10 years that this movie is kind of about and is kind of reflecting. I'm not really the best person to analyze that, but there is sort of a thing about it. Some of the passage of time and kind of decay and things. And I guess the falter of affluence that I think is sort of alluding to what the last 15 or so years have been like for Portland, Oregon.
No, exactly. And, once we get to that part in the synopsis, though, I do really want to talk about that, because this film, even though, once again, a guy from Milwaukee who fucking shot a movie in Portland really does, like, capture the feeling of Portland that I've fucking experienced having visited now 3 times. Like, a lot of it is, like, it feels like he's like a lifelong fucking Portlander and shot this movie. It really does kind of feel like that.
And I think there's a case to be made that maybe at least with the things, the kind of like, the cycles, the ups and downs, I think you could argue that Milwaukee has gone in the last 15 years kind of through a similar.
Oh, yeah, you are correct. You are definitely correct.
I mean, you could say that about many major cities, but at least culturally, I think we've seen the ebb and flow happen at almost the same times in Milwaukee and Portland.
Oh,
and
no,
also,
most definitely.
Well, most people that live in Portland are from the Midwest now. So.
Yes, that's actually true. I actually remember we were at Powell's once, and I saw it was like a map of Minnesota or something, and I said to you, I don't know if you even heard me, but I said to you, I'm like, oh, is this to remind half of Portlanders where they came from?
Oh, man. I mean, like, so one of my best friends was born, and well, not born in Bend. She was born in Summer Lake. She was raised in Bend. And when she says sometimes when you tell people when she still lived there as an adult, when she would say, oh, I was raised here, they'd be like, really? Like, people are surprised when you, like, were raised in Portland or you were raised in Bend now and you aren't a transplant.
No, it is. In fact, I looked at a statistic once that Oregon actually has one of the highest rates of like non-Oregon people living in Oregon. Like a lot of transplants. And Wisconsin actually has one of the lowest rates of that. So you don't really hear that too much.
Well, I guess like, so the thing with Wisconsin, and when I think about going back there is, and there's other reasons to go back there, the cost of living is so fucking low.
Oh, yeah. I know
Like,
we've talked
you
about
think,
it
like,
off the air, but God, rent is so much cheaper here. It's crazy.
But it's like, okay, let's say you're like, okay, I'm willing to be living in Wisconsin. I hate to say it like that, but like, what if you decide to yourself, if I'm in Milwaukee or I'm in Madison and I never leave, I could live in Wisconsin. I think there's a lot of people that maybe make that decision.
Oh, God, absolutely. Yeah. But yeah, so let's get back to the synopsis here. So Nick Cage sells truffles to Emir, played by the actor Alex Wolff. Now, interestingly enough, I read a little snippet that said that Nick Cage is actually Alex Wolff's favorite actor, which isn't very surprising. He's my favorite actor personally. So I'm like,
I think he's a lot of people's favorite actor. We don't need to put too fine a point on it. Obviously, you've spoken a lot about Nick Cage, and I think anyone that would listen to our show probably feels similar. He's a great American actor, and he always has been. This whole critical, like, renaissance reappraisal he's getting, it's kind of horseshit. Because every fucking role he takes, he really goes all in. And people all will say that he's acting weird or he's making weird choices. I don't even want to say bad choices. I don't think they are. But it's like, yeah, he's making interesting choices. But they are choices. It's not like he's like this dumbass who doesn't know how to act. He's making like very interesting choices.
No, absolutely. And I remember mentioning it to you off air, but like Nick Cage has like an academics level understanding of like German expressionism. Like he knows how to fucking act. He comes from a filmmaking family. He's not just some crazy guy. He's not like...
He's a fucking Coppola.
Yeah, exactly. That's why he changed his name to Cage, because he didn't want to get favoritism. Like his actual name is Nicholas Coppola.
So the thing that I have always heard Cage say describing his own acting style, and he's amazingly candid about it. Like he's very self-aware. A lot of actors wouldn't talk about some of the weird comments they get, but Cage is very aware that people see him as a weird actor. But what I've always heard him say, and I think it's very cool, is he's like, well, you know, if I don't have good direction, I'm just gonna... He almost says it like he gets bored. He's like, I go really big, because I just want to see how far I can push it. And if the director isn't going to tell me to hold it in, I'm just going to go bigger.
A lot of
that makes so much sense.
Yeah,
so if he has a director who can hem him in, he'll give this really structured performance. But if they don't have the sack to do it, he's going to go off the rails.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like, just got, like, a lot of people, you know about the Nick Cage freakouts. They've seen the compilations. They, could probably say some of, like, his craziest movies. Like, they know the lines by heart. Like, some Nick Cage lines are just that iconic, like, the crazy ones. But he is so fucking understated in this movie. But it's one of his, if not his, single best performance in a movie of all time. And once again, from a directorial debut, like it's crazy what kind of performance that Michael Sarnowski is able to get out of Nicolas Cage in this movie. Understated, but yeah, just phenomenal and just like heart-wrenching. It's crazy.
He needs a director who understands why he acts the way he acts. I think that this film understands him. I think 8mm understand him. And I think Wild at Heart do. I think those are all directors who are very different and they relate to Cage in different ways. But all three of them are cases where the director clearly sees Cage's kind of eccentric tendencies and says, like, here's how this fits into our movie.
There's actually another movie that I'm not a big fan of, but it's a movie that Nick Cage personally identifies with called Joe. Have you seen that one?
No.
It was directed by David Gordon Green. I know we keep talking about David Gordon Green. I'm not seeing a fucking David Gordon Green movie, I promise. But we've mentioned David Gordon Green like fucking 3 episodes now. But that was one of his movies that he directed. And Nick Cage said, I think before this movie came out, because he said that there's a lot of aspects of Robin Feld that are very similar to Nick Cage. But he says that Joe before then was like the biggest like encapsulation of Nick Cage's personality, which is hilarious because in that movie he's like a murderous philanderer. So it's like, okay.
Well, that's kind of cool though. Like, who's he murdering?
I mean, he's murdering like bad people. Don't get me wrong.
Okay, cool. Yeah, cool. If I was starring in a movie where I was killing bad people, I would totally be like, yeah, this is basically me in real life.
He also at one point like sicks a dog on, I think it's a rapist, and has like the dog like rip him limb from limb and stuff. That's a bizarre movie.
Oh my God, this sounds fucking awesome, Taylor. This sounds like a Nick Cage movie.
Yeah. And also, and one last thing before we go into the synopsis, because this is actually legitimately insane. But one of the guys that he kills at the end of the movie is the father of like this kid that he's like mentoring, because he's like a tree cutter or something like that. And he gets like a tree cutting apprentice who's like some 16-year-old or whatever. And his dad, who's just this horrible piece of shit. David Gordon Green like got an actual homeless person to play this guy, like a homeless drunk. And at the end of the movie, he also like pours out his underage daughter for like guys to rape. It's a fucking awful, just grotesque movie. It's a pretty unpleasant movie. But Nick Cage kills this guy at the end, and Nick Cage dies in the process. And like the homeless guy gets shot, and then he like falls into the like lake and like drowns to death. Like that's how he dies. And in real life, before this movie came out, that actor, well, obviously homeless man, it was like the only movie he was ever in. He actually died by drowning to death in Austin, Texas. Like just a bizarre ending.
That's a real bit of trivia.
Yeah, God, that movie's
way to bring
nuts.
down the mood, Taylor.
Well, talk about bring down the mood. We'll definitely bring down the mood when we talk about the synopsis here. But yeah, so once again, so Amir is a young and inexperienced supplier of luxury ingredients to high-end restaurants, which, you know, I know we're going to interrupt this again, but God, high-end restaurants in general, you know what? I'm sure you're obviously sick of the foodie bullshit in Portland, but man, Portland has good food. Holy shit.
Yeah, of course it does. You know, I'm talking about truffles, mushrooms, seafood. Whatever happened to a burger, right? Whatever happened to some coffee-flavored coffee?
You know, Brian, I was just about to say, I want a burger-flavored burger. I don't need a garlic aioli.
A garlic aioli infused. I can't even think of anything. But jalapeno cornbread. But actually, that sounded pretty good, huh?
That actually sounds pretty good.
Fuck!
But yeah, so one night, Rob is attacked by some unidentified assailants as they steal his pig, which I remember seeing this in the theaters and I wasn't expecting it. It's a very harrowing scene.
Yeah, it's tough. You hear the pig squealing in the distance as the sounds of his squeals get further and further.
And then Nick Cage gets hit by like a fucking shovel or a pipe or something and gets knocked out.
Yeah.
Like, which is one of Nick Cage's many injuries in this film.
Yeah, he gets drafted. That's the other thing that struck me, because until watching this yesterday, I still was under the impression that it was going to turn into an action movie. And then when you realize that it's not, that Nick Cage is not playing an action hero, he's just playing a guy, you know, a guy who probably has not gotten in that many fights, then you are aware of that. When you see him take damage, you're like, oh, this is like, he's responding to getting hit in a realistic way. When he gets hit by that fucking pipe, and they go into his cabin to take his pick, he's down for a second.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, it's not like fucking John.
It's not Con Air.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I also love. I got nothing bad to say about Con Air.
Yeah, great fucking movie for sure. But yeah, so after that incident, he reaches out to Amir, who helps him locate a group of impoverished drug addicts suspected by another local truffle hunter of being the culprits. They claim to have given the pig to someone from downtown Portland. Now, I also love the scenes where he's like trying to go into like town and like trying to figure out what's going on, because he goes into like this random diner and he asks for Marge, which, you know, I know Oregon, Portland, Marge. I don't know if that was a Simpsons reference on purpose, but either way, whatever. And it's like, oh, you know, died 10 years ago. And it's like, oh, he hasn't talked to anybody in like fucking years. Like, he is a true fucking recluse. It's wild. And actually, the actress who, you know, the truffle hunter I just mentioned earlier, she's actually an actress from Portland. She was in some pretty high-end like TV shows back in the 80s. I wish I would have put her in the credits here, but she was in a lot of TV shows in the 80s and stuff like that, but she's actually from Portland originally, so I thought that was interesting. But yeah, so Rob and Amir drive to Portland and infiltrate an underground fighting ring run by Edgar. Now, we meet Edgar in a slightly earlier scene. He runs like this food truck night market thing or whatever, and Nick Cage goes up to him, offers him some food, and is like, basically like, hey, you remember me. And Edgar's like, you know what, your name meant something here 15 years ago, but you're nobody now, so just like get the fuck out of here. And until his name Robin Feld is actually said in the movie, because it's not actually said in the movie for probably a good 20-25 minutes, like Amir is slowly learning that like this guy who he looks down on and sees as just somebody who can basically just supply him his fucking shit so he can make money off of. He's like, oh, this guy is like an actual human being with like a history and people who like know and respect him. Like, who are you? And like Amir's realization on just like how fucking small he is in this world is really fascinating. Like, Alex Wolff does a really good job of portraying like his naivete and like ignorance. I appreciate that a lot.
There's a real kind of a, like, I felt a Scorsese-esque kind of thing of like descending into like an underworld feeling in this. Maybe not specifically Scorsese, but like it's really the feeling of like kind of naivete, yeah, descending into this kind of clandestine world that's like unraveling before him.
No, absolutely 100%. And we talk about underground. So eventually, Rob and Amir make it to a basement of a restaurant that is underneath, what was it? They said the Hotel Portland, which I don't think is a real thing, right, Brian?
I meant to look it up, but I didn't.
they made it up for the movie, but the restaurant that they walk through to get to that like underground facility is actually at the restaurant called Huber's, which is located in downtown Portland. It's actually the oldest restaurant in Portland. So I thought that was really interesting. Have you been there, Brian?
No, I haven't. People love talking about Huber's, but my personal take is that people love talking about Huber's more than they like eating there. Because I hear people talking about it being the first restaurant, but not a lot of people talking about the food there. I'm not saying that it's a criticism of the restaurant. I'm just saying I think people like to share that as, I work in downtown Portland, and people like to come in and go like, oh, we were just by Huber's. That's the oldest restaurant in Portland, like that.
Oh, yeah. No, there's definitely places that are like
probably
more iconic locations than, and yeah, I'm sure the food is good, but it's definitely a place that's known for its history, probably more so than its food, as you can imagine. But
I try to avoid Huber's. I leave that to God.
But yeah, so eventually they make it to this underground waiters fight club where, I don't know if it's really a fight club. It just seems like a place where like guys just sort of beat on one another to like get rid of grudges and make money, or like get over grudges and make money.
I think it's a little less a fight club. I think it's a little bit more initiative. And I think it's a little bit more like we're in this world together and we have shit on each other and we're keeping secrets. So we all need to be able to have this place and we need to beat the shit out of each other to be able to work together.
Okay, so kind of like Little St. James.
I mean, actually, my thought is that it is sort of a compromise thing, maybe not a sexual one, but that it is sort of like we have this dark secret world that we share, and now we are bonded. Our bond is consolidated in this way. It was kind of my read on that.
But yeah, so Nick Cage goes in there without saying a word. He writes his name up on the board, and the whole idea is that in this fight club, like, you basically beat on an individual, and whoever bids the most can, like, beat on this individual. And everybody, when Robin Feld's name goes up there, like, everybody's betting, which kind of makes me think that he probably didn't have maybe the kindest reputation in the restaurant industry at that point.
So what's the thing that you always hear about a great chef? That they are like tyrants, that working under a great chef is abusive. Similar to like when we talk about like, we talked with Scott about directors like Cameron or Friedkin, how they're kind of psychos. And that's what it's like working with a great chef. I've heard that from chefs. That's what it's like. And then you think like, so Robin Feld is this chef who all of these people, a lot of the ideas that a lot of these people 10 or 15 years ago were under him. So for whatever reason, they do have some sort of history from him, or at least always wanted to.
Yeah, and it seems like, I mean, a lot of people have like a positive reputation of him.
Maybe as a chef, as a cook.
Yeah, but maybe not as an individual, yeah.
Yeah, maybe not as a human being.
But yeah, so after Nick Cage gets his beat down and gets some information from Edgar, the following morning, Amir voices his admiration for Rob as a chef. Amir reveals that his parents had an unhappy marriage and says their happiest time was after a dinner at Rob's restaurant, before his mother eventually died by suicide. So a lot of exposition dump in the scene, but it's just a very beautifully shot scene. It's like in a dank apartment, not dank apartment, a dark apartment. It's not really dank, actually. It's like one of those quote unquote luxury high-rise apartment that is like $1 million as like a condo or whatever. And then there's like 15 homeless tents outside. That's definitely how Portland is.
Yeah. The Ritz-Carlton just opened just a block down from my job.
And let me guess, there's like 20 tents in front of it.
No, it seems like the people at the Ritz are keeping them away, but they're just a little ways off to the side. Like the actual Ritz itself doesn't have anything in front of it.
But yeah, very good scene, very good performance from both Alex Wolff and Nick Cage once again. And following Edgar's lead, Rob asks Amir to secure reservations for themselves at Eurydice, a trendy cuisine restaurant. And once we get to that scene, oh my God, I want to talk about that scene so bad, because it's probably my single favorite scene in the movie when we get to meet Derek.
Yeah, mine too.
In the meantime, Rob visits the house where he used to live with his wife, Lori, whose death compelled Rob to withdraw from society. And I also love the scene because, I think we've all had that moment, at least at some point, especially people who have, had a childhood home or, their parents moved away from it or sold it or got evicted or whatever the fuck. And you just go back to it and you have all these memories and everything, but somebody else lives there. They're making their own history with it. And you go up there and it's like, oh, I remember this used to be this way and this way and this way. And people are just like, oh, I don't remember that at all. And it's a piece of your history that's like just kind of missing because you can never truly go back there.
It only exists, in your memory of it now. Because even the people that live in that place, that's nothing to them.
Exactly. God, like, thankfully, I don't have that experience because my childhood home, even though my mom doesn't live there anymore, my brother lives there, so I can always go back there. But God, some people, they just don't have that, and that's got to be really, like, tragic.
I don't have that experience. My mom still lives in the same plot of land, where we lived for most of my life, where I was raised.
No, that's based as hell, man.
I guess. I mean, it's a trailer in Mountain, Wisconsin. It's fine.
I mean, if it's got good memories, it's got good memories. Or if it has bad memories, I guess. But,
It's got both. You know how it is.
Yeah, every place has its demons and evil spirits. No, I'm just kidding. But yes, talk about evil spirits and demons. So at Eurydice, Rob asks to meet its head chef, Derek, played by the actor David Nell, a former prep cook at Rob's restaurant. Rob pointedly yet empathetically criticizes Derek for opening a contemporary restaurant rather than the pub he always wanted to run. Oh God, this scene is just incredible.
This is the best scene in the movie. To me, the rest of the movie, the plot exists as a vehicle to get to this scene for me. The point of the movie is to me nestled in this scene.
And you just see this guy who is like, he's like a shell. He's not like a real person. He's somebody who's creating a persona that he knows will make him money and will make him successful, but he's not happy. Like the actor does a really good job of having like just that expression in his eyes and his face that like he is just putting
retail
on his facade.
face.
Yeah, it's incredible. And Nick Cage, just dresses him down, not even like being a dick and like calling him like a piece of shit loser or whatever, but he's literally just like, you're not happy. This isn't real. None of this is real. And then he says a line at one point where he says, we don't really have a lot of things in life to really care about. And like Derek is like on the verge of tears. Like it's a crazy scene.
I think that's really when you get to like the nut of the movie, kind of what it's about, having this past where you had like a craft and you had art and you had this community. And as that community kind of like either withers or changes or just stabs you in the back, you sort of that moment and that dust is taken from you. And what that makes me think is how I hear a lot of people who have been here in Portland longer than I am kind of allude to how 15, even only 10 years ago, is still a pretty bustling place. It had this moment where it was kind of going through this renaissance. That's when the quote unquote hipster thing happened. Of course, there's gentrification with that. Like there's pros and cons to it. But then you've got where Portland's at now, which I think you could argue is like a ghost of that. You know, there's this kind of, those days are kind of over of Portland being this growing. I mean, it's still growing. It's still got hip places, but it's almost like it's still putting out that memory from 10 years ago, you know, the Portlandia thing, when it's not really like that. It's actually in pretty dire straits economically right now. And that's sort of what I sort of wonder if there's actual thematic reasons that this takes place in Portland, because that's sort of like what Robin is experiencing, is that he sees the writing on the wall of all of these things about to, you know, topple, or sees how they're fake, as he says they're not real, and withdraws from it. And he comes back and there's nothing as he remembers it, you know?
I'm not really sure why they picked Portland specifically, but I do remember reading that they were originally going to do it in somewhere in Europe that has like a big truffle industry too. So I'm glad they didn't go that direction, because obviously that wouldn't have much cultural resonance to us. It'd just be like, okay, cool, I guess. But yeah, a city like Portland or whatever, it's like there's like that connection for us where we can like see kind of like why the setting of Portland really matters for this kind of movie. Because yeah, I mean, if they shot this movie in, I don't know, fucking Atlanta or something, it would just be like, okay, there's this interesting like dour story about this man, but like, does that really have any connection to like Atlanta, Georgia? But Portland, I can definitely see.
Visually, Portland is very appropriate for this. It is one of the cities where there's still very old architecture and very distinct architecture. It's also rainy and muddy.
Yeah, exactly. Like even though I've not seen much of the raininess, because I've always went in the dry times, but like I've heard that about the Pacific Northwest forever, is that it's just fucking rainy and not freezing cold, but just cold and like rainy and like
it's always wet.
Always wet, exactly. But yeah, so after this, Derek confesses that Amir's wealthy father, Darius, played by the actor Adam Arkin, was behind the theft of his pig, having learned of its existence from Amir. So yeah, at one point, like Amir talks about how he's like, oh yeah, you know, I'm in this new thing. I got this guy with truffles and everything. And then because Darius is just like a cutthroat piece of shit businessman, he's like, well, I'm going to get my son out of this to, you know, cut out some of the competition. Like he literally sees his son as like competition. That's how much of like a cutthroat asshole this guy is. So he has junkies assault Nick Cage and fucking take his pig, and then yeah, just rough. And you hear a lot throughout this movie is like, this is not a guy you want to piss off. This is not a guy you want to piss off. And like, even though once we meet Darius, like he's not necessarily the most personally threatening guy of all time or anything like that, but like just the idea that a guy would be willing to like just hurt other people to undermine his own son should really tell you how big of a piece of shit this guy is. Like, God, it's rough.
Well, and because he justifies it to himself, I guess, by saying his son isn't cut out for the business. That's what he tells Robin somewhat later on. You know, I think it's that he's like, well, this is my thing. This isn't what my son is made for. I need to get him out of it. But it's clearly because he doesn't want to deal with him as competition.
No, absolutely. And like you do see in earlier scenes, like Amir is, he's a young guy. He's trying to figure out his own voice. He's trying to build up his own self-confidence or whatever. But like, a lot of that was probably undermined by his own dad being probably a domineering, fucking abusive asshole. Like that's just the reality. So like, yeah, it's just one of those things where, Darius created a self-fulfilling prophecy with his own son and is trying to do everything in his power to make sure that self-fulfilling prophecy fucking happens. Yeah, there's a lot of psychology in this movie if you haven't noticed, to the audience at home. Like there's a lot of fucking psychology in this movie. But yeah, so after that, Rob angrily ends his partnership with Amir before going to confront Darius at his home. Darius promises him $25,000 in exchange for the pig and threatens to kill it should Rob continue his pursuit. Amir visits his comatose. Oh yeah, and so after that, like Amir comes up and his car has been beaten up because we didn't mention earlier, but there's a scene where Nick Cage does actually have just a very, very understandable freak out, but not like the sustained Nick Cage freakouts that everybody's made memes about. But that one is one of the more powerful freakouts for me because it's like been an hour of just him getting shit on, and then he's just like in just a moment of just like unfettered fucking anger, understandable anger, he just lashes out, and I understand that. Like
that's a very anguished moment.
It is for sure. And he just like, I love how he just beats up Amir's car. He's like, oh man, don't beat up my Camaro. And he's like, it makes me laugh really hard when that happened. But yeah, so later Amir visits his comatose mother. So Amir mentioned that his mother killed herself, but she's comatose in some sort of like assisted living facility or something like that, or like a hospital or something like that. And it's never really stated what her health condition actually is. Like maybe killed herself in the sense of like actually committed suicide, but was unsuccessful and is just comatose from it. Or maybe, like his idea of his mother is dead, so he doesn't consider her like...
That's what I was thinking it was. He doesn't want to talk about her. He feels like his father is keeping her alive kind of as part of this delusion, but he knows that that's hollow. So he likes to think of her as dead, or that he likes to think of her having killed herself because that would have been something that would have been her choice and she would have had control over.
Exactly. Or on top of it, too, like Darius kind of keeping her alive is kind of one last fuck you, because it's, in my opinion, pretty heavily implied that he was like verbally, at the very least, verbally abusive to his wife on top of it.
Well, yeah, and controlling, domineering.
Exactly, 100%. So yeah, it's once again not made clear really what her condition is, but whatever it is, she's definitely not dead, but whatever her condition is kind of made her dead to, unfortunately, her son and to a certain extent her husband too. This movie's very sad. Like, once again, this movie's very sad. This movie's about grief and, loss and getting over the trauma and, just surviving the darkness that is Portland, Oregon. Like, this is just Portland, Oregon, the movie. But yes, and also after this, Rob admits that he doesn't actually need the pig to hunt truffles since he uses the trees, but wants her back because he just loves the pig, which is awesome because, once again, this pig bit Nick Cage a lot. So the fact he still loves her after all that, that's real love right there.
It's so funny that it took Amir this long to realize that Nick Cage cares about the pig like a pet. He's so like, wow, you love the pig. It's like, obviously.
Well, but that's the thing, though, is that this guy is just probably just so disconnected from real human fucking feelings and emotions because he was basically raised to be like a narcissistic asshole by his own dad. Like, he learns that empathy through this is actually pretty impressive because a lot of these people would never learn that empathy no matter what.
One of my favorite things about Amir is that throughout the movie, he's always listening to like an NPR show where the host explains classical music to you.
God, yes!
And it's like, because he wants to affect the idea of being someone that listens to classical music. So he's like putting on the airs of like listening to it.
And I also love whenever he's in the car with Nick Cage just turns it off immediately. That's really funny.
Yeah.
And there's also like scenes where he's like doing a pep talk in a mirror or something. And he's like, you know what? You're going to do this. And then it like cuts off as he's like mid-sentence. So like even the movie doesn't take it seriously. Like, this movie's not really funny, but there are definitely some pretty funny moments. There's also a scene where Nick Cage like goes to some house and he like steals a bike, and when the guy's like, hey, what are you doing? He just screams at him, goes like, ah!
Yeah, that's very Nick Cage in the best way.
And I also love, like, I rewinded a couple times, but the guy he screams at just like has his head down, so he's like, oh, that's a real Portlander. Just have your head down when like a homeless guy steals your shit.
Well, yeah, what are you gonna do? You're gonna be like, hey, you don't want that bike back. They sat on it.
But yeah, so Nick Cage's grand plan is he's actually going to assemble a meal for Darius, and he asks Amir to gather a list of items in order to retrieve. it's kind of a harebrained idea, but Rob's idea is that if he makes Darius a meal, the meal that Amir was mentioning earlier, probably about half an hour earlier in the movie, that like, oh, it'll stir something in him and it'll basically give him his pig back. And there's also another scene that I really love. So Rob retrieves a baguette from his former baker. And this scene is just, it's basically like kind of like a one-shot scene. Like it just kind of zooms in on Nick Cage and this actress. And they talk about like him and his wife's past, his wife Lori's past, about like how, wasn't it that Lori always wanted to be a baker or something like that? Or is that something?
Yes.
Or was it? Yeah. So she always wanted to be a baker. And at one point, this person that Lori worked with bought this bakery, changed a little bit of the design or whatever. And like, it's just like all those feelings of just loss and mourning over these last 15 years just all come out in this like span of 2 minutes. Like the music sting is beautiful when she brings out the baguette and was it salted caramel tart or whatever, something like that. And he's like, can I have another? And it's a very just beautiful scene. Like that one almost made me cry just by itself. Like,
yeah, same. That got me choked up. I actually have heard multiple people say they were moved to tears by this movie. I wasn't quite there, but I came close in this scene.
I did too. I don't really cry at movies very much. That's just not really my preferred artistic medium to do that. But I will say this is like probably in my like top 10 movies that have made me on the verge of tears. Like even on my third or fourth watch, it still stirs that out of me. So it's just incredible.
This begs the question, Taylor. I'm sorry. What is your preferred artistic medium to cry to?
Well, it depends. I would say probably music more so than movies. Even then, I don't really cry at music too much, but sometimes it stirs that out of me occasionally.
There's a specific type of song that will move me in a really strange, and it's not songs I usually identify with. It's usually kind of like political songs that capture some feeling that I wish had like power. Like a song like, say, like This Is England by The Clash. This is quite a tangent, but I had to ask.
No, it's all good. Like, yeah, to me, I don't really know if it's anything specific, but it's usually like, yeah, either a song about like, you know, somebody passing or something like that, or yeah, like a political song or something like that, or, you know, even a little bit of nerdiness of me, maybe even like a fucking anime song or something that from an anime I watched for like 10 fucking years and ended or something like that. Like, I don't know. Like, that's just an example. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I know what you mean.
But yeah, so Amir sources special ingredients for the meal, including a bottle of wine from Rob and Lori's personal collection held at the mausoleum containing Lori's ashes. And eventually they go to Darius's home. I think they sneak into it. I don't remember. I don't think they have access to this fucking asshole's home. But anyways, they get into the house and they cook this meal. I can't even remember exactly what the meal is. I think they say it in the movie because, okay, so I totally forgot to mention this, but this movie is separated into 3 acts like a lot of movies are. And each act is actually named after a specific dish. And I think the third act is named after this specific dish, if I'm not mistaken, but I could be wrong about that.
Yeah, it must be.
And I don't remember what it is, but either way, they make this dish for Darius at probably one of the most awkward dinners ever shown in a movie. It's like just pitch dark with like some candlelight or something like that. And Darius is like, I'm not eating this shit. Like, just go away. And Amir's like, just please eat the food. And then it's like a good 2 pretty tense minutes of him eating the food. And then once he like gets to the final source of the ingredient, he like just starts breaking down. And like,
I think it's the wine.
I think it is the wine, yeah. And he like,
because one of the things Amir says is that they had drank a lot of the wine.
You're totally right. Yeah, it's definitely the wine. And he like walks away from the table and like he yells at Nick Cage, like, get out, get the fuck out, blah, blah. And he's just like, I just want my pig. And then we unfortunately learn the sad truth, which to be fair, I always kind of figured. But unfortunately, the junkies that we mentioned earlier that were responsible for stealing Nick Cage's pig accidentally killed the pig in the process of stealing it. And of course, Rob breaks down. You don't hear anything, but you just see him like collapse on the floor, which I thought was a great move. I mean, I don't mind Nick Cage crying in movies. I've certainly seen many movies where he's crying, but like just the idea of like just the silence as his like world shatters.
That's
like,
more affecting. That's more realistic, probably.
Exactly.
Just
so
the
I
sound of him
that.
Hitting the floor and the sinking feeling, because when you receive really horrible news, I feel like
your whole world just collapses. Yeah.
But people don't normally go, they normally, it's a sinking moment where it hits them and it sinks in. And then the crying is more, it's quieter. It's more inward.
Yeah, you don't go, no! You don't do like Darth Vader, no. Like, that's not how that really works.
That's just not, yeah.
Like, I don't know, maybe if you saw somebody get hit by a car or something like really like impactfully tragic, but if you're in like a hospital room and you hear like your wife died during surgery, you're not going to go, no!
It's going to go slower, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so afterwards, Amir drives him back to a diner near his forest home, the diner that was in the beginning of the movie. Despite Amir's carelessness, Rob decides to resume his partnership with him. Returning to his forest, Rob washes his bloody face in the lake. So something we totally forgot to mention. So like Nick Cage is like wearing his battle damage the entire movie. Like from the very beginning, you know, when he gets hit with a shovel or the pipe or whatever, he's got like a bloody face. And then he gets beat in the restaurant. He's got all the blood and shit like that. Like he walks around like a Portland homeless person. But yeah, so he finally washes off after all this is done. Maybe some symbolism, but who knows? And then at the very end, he goes to the cabin, finally plays the cassette that we had seen at the beginning of the film, but he just couldn't like bear to listen to it. And it's Laurie singing Bruce Springsteen's I'm on Fire. And that's how the movie ends. And in a pretty good rendition of it on an acoustic guitar, which I appreciated. That's how the movie ended. But yeah, so that is the movie. Fantastic. Fucking, I love this movie. Like I said, I've seen it 4 fucking times now, and it hits just as well every time. Like, it's crazy to me.
I like this movie. I regret missing it in its theatrical run. It would have been a good theatrical experience. Would have been a fun movie to see with friends as it was new. I am glad I saw this. Even though there was a scene that I found really emotionally affecting, when I finally saw it, first of all, this was presented to me, I feel like, at least implicitly, as a John Wick style action. It's not at all. I love what it is. I'm glad it's not that after having seen it, but it's not quite what I was in the headspace for, which is fine, because I love what it is. Watching it, I remember thinking, because a lot of people that I'm friends with said that they were like moved to tears by this movie. And I remember thinking, being a little surprised, not in a bad way, but thinking this is such a niche, such a specific movie with such heavy themes, and it's so dense, and like you said, it's so psychology heavy that I was kind of thinking, oh, I'm surprised that so many people I know specifically were like really identified with this movie. But I think what it is really just the weight of Cage's performance.
Yeah, I think that too. And then also, you know, we're talking about how it is, you know, very specific and very psychology heavy. And, you know, I was watching an interview once again with Michael Sarnowski earlier. I've only seen one interview with him. It's a great interview. He mentions in the interview that he partially based Robin Feld off of himself, because he mentioned that his dad unfortunately passed away when he was a child. And it's one of those things, when I learned that, I was like, oh, so that's why you were able to write this story of like grief and loss and tragedy like so well. And like, obviously you don't need to necessarily have that experience to be able to write a story like that, but it makes it that much more impactful in my opinion. Like,
right. And it makes sense. Like, it makes sense that he wasn't just pulling these themes out of the air.
No, exactly, 100%. But yeah, Michael Sarnowski, like, if you're out there, man, and you listen to this episode, and if you do listen to this episode, man, I would love to have you on the podcast. Like, holy shit, seriously. But I'm sure that won't happen. But if it does, I would love that. But yeah, either way, like, Michael Sarnowski, if you're out there, man, just keep fucking making movies, man. Like, if this is your directorial debut, I would love to see. Oh, yeah. I mean, even if they're not like big budget movies, I hope that this fucking Quiet Place movie does well, so like he can get more projects. But either way, like, yeah, I want to see more fucking Michael Sarnowski. I really do.
To be honest, I'd like to see him do more kind of modest budget, like character study things like this, just because this is so well executed.
Bring back another beloved actor who has been in a lot of schlock recently and see if you can bring out this same performance. I mean, obviously Nick Cage is an incredible actor, so that was not going to be the most difficult task ever. But like, I don't know, try to make a John Travolta movie, like
Alec Baldwin.
Oh yes, he's gonna direct Rust Zero.
Oh my god, yeah.
Oh god. But you know, speaking of masterpieces, so you know, we were talking about how a lot of people portrayed this as John Wick with a pig, right? In the Amazon reviews that I'm going to go over, I did not include any of those reviews, but like nearly all the 1-star reviews are like, I was told this was John Wick with a pig and I was very disappointed. Like when I was making the bit earlier about like this is like, you know, G worded and R worded, like straight up, like half the reviews are people fucking complaining about that. Like it's just
the
horrible.
Movie never presented itself as that.
No, and
that's just the thing other people told you.
And I saw the trailer, and you know, Michael Sarnowski mentioned it too, because he mentioned that a lot of people like were led to believe this was an action movie too. So like, basically everybody was misled into this. But I saw the trailer, and there's like no indication that that's what this movie was going to be.
I was thinking of that last night. When I think back to the trailer I saw, there is nothing that the trailer puts forth that is leading you to believe that it's an action.
Yeah. You don't see Nick Cage with a gun and like the fucking like bullets going back and he's just like going, ah, you don't see any.
Where's my fucking pig?
Yeah, where's my motherfucking pig?
I need my pig.
Yeah. Maybe if they make a parody of this movie, I would watch that.
Starring Nick Cage again?
Yeah. Oh god, but yes, let's get into these Amazon reviews. And oh my god, Brian, I know there are 2 of them in here that you will love because there's so much to go over about Portland specifically in these reviews.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
But our very first review is a 5-star review from the user GO, once again, who gives this 5 stars. And the head of the review says, that I have what I paid it for safe in the mailbox. And the body of the review said, all's well, hooded sweatshirt, 3 awesome movies catch up with more sales, thanks. And they do the okay emoji, which this person has bad grammar and they're a Nazi. Horrible. I hate this review.
So what are they talking about? They're glad that it got delivered with a hooded sweatshirt they ordered?
I guess so, but
that's
the All's
cool.
Well hooded sweatshirt. I don't know if there's an All's Well band out there. I don't know if that's a band that exists.
Like a pop punk band?
Yeah.
Band that's touring with Title Fight right now?
Yeah. I hate my life. I think you were the one that posted that one, but it was like every pop punk band ever. It's like,
yeah,
I love
that was
pizza.
Yeah.
I make these songs for my friends and for pizza. Yeah, or something like that.
This song is about my hometown.
I hate my hometown. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, speaking of people who hate their hometowns, so this next review is a 1-star review from the user 2AR. And the head of the review says, ridiculous plot. And the body of the review says, this movie has no point. It's circular, leaving you right where you started. And really, the quote-unquote chef, who obviously hasn't bathed for months, is covered in mud and blood for days, just goes around like normal and nobody seems to mind. Yes, because it's Portland. Everybody
Oh my God. They even make a point of that in the movie.
They do, yes, because a lot of people, including Derek, just goes, do you need medical attention? And they just completely move beyond
They just
that.
talk to him like a homeless guy, yeah.
And it's like, yes, he goes around like that, completely normal, because that's what like 90% of homeless people in Portland look like.
Also, that this fucking reviewer is like a chef, and it's like, well, he's a retired chef. He's like living in obscurity. It's not like dumb.
Yeah, it's not like fucking Gordon Ramsay or something.
It's not like he's like, oh, I'm still a renowned chef, but I live in filth,
Yeah, Jamie Oliver has just had like a really long depressive spell.
Yeah, like this fucking person.
Oh God! And speaking of fucking person, this one's even better, Brian. So this is another.
All right.
This is another 1-star review from Mary Senatori, who gives this film, once again, 1 star. And the header of the review says, tedious and pretentious. And the body of the review says, now, trust me, Brian, I'm not trying to dox this person. You'll probably never interact with them. But the review starts like this. As a Portlander and Nicolas Cage fan, I had high hopes for this movie. They were dashed. What a slog! The plot and dialogue are tedious and pretentious. A chef and restaurant worker, quote-unquote, fight club under Pioneer Courthouse Square? Why exactly? The movie really never takes off, and on top of all the tedium, it really bugged me that the Nick Cage character never showered, even after being covered in blood after being brutally beaten in the gratuitous Fight Club scene. I'd give it 0 stars if I could. Now, Mary Senatori, I understand you live in Northwest Portland. No, I'm not going to do that. But, like, okay, so first off, right, like, I understand some people may have problems with this movie. I can understand that. But, like, I always love these people who do, like, fucking cinema sin stuff, like, he never showered. And it's like, that doesn't matter!
The worst fucking type of movie quote-unquote criticism. Gotta point out everything that doesn't make sense to me, like, because he doesn't care about showering. That's why.
No. I mean, they even mention it in the movie that, like, fucking Amir is willing to get him a shower and he doesn't even respond to it.
He just doesn't care. Yeah.
Like, the fact that he washes his face after all this is done is, like, a character progression for him.
Yeah. I mean, that's supposed to indicate to you something about Robin's character as soon as you meet him, that he doesn't care about hygiene and showers and that. That's not like some nonsense thing. That it's like he's like that in the movie for a reason.
Yeah, so this person, Miss Senatori, you are a moron. And also, another Portland thing that I totally forgot to mention in the review, but when they mention Darius's address, it's something like 321 Northwest whatever, and they go to this neighborhood, which, I'm not going to say which neighborhood you live in, Brian, but it looks like a house in your fucking neighborhood. And I'm like, okay, first off, 3 Northwest, that's like downtown Portland. Like, no houses look like that in downtown Portland. Like, right? Like, 3 Northwest would be downtown Portland, right?
Yeah, it would be. It's a 3-digit, yeah. And I know what you're talking about. It does look kind of like my neighborhood.
So, but I'm glad they did that, because if they actually put like what could have been a more realistic address, people might have like found this house and, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So I'm glad they gave it like a complete bullshit address, but I did think that was pretty funny. I'm like, wait, 3 something Northwest? Like, did they give the address for fucking Voodoo Donuts? Like, what the fuck?
I'm actually going to look it up and see if that's like an in-joke, the address they picked.
I looked it up, and the actual street name isn't a street name in Portland. Maybe the 321 Northwest means something. I'm not sure. But yeah, so that is our review of Pig. Do we have any final thoughts before we end this review of this fantastic masterpiece, Brian?
I would recommend this movie pretty much to any Nick Cage fan. I think if you are someone who enjoys Nick Cage, an actor, or even if you just think he's interesting, because I think, like, I'm a big fan of him. I know you are too, Taylor. But I think there's a case to be made that some people just like to watch his movies, even though they don't like everything he does because he's interesting. This is a great example of it. It's a movie that uses him to its full effect. Now, if you like really emotional character study dramas, I would also recommend this movie. It does that very effectively. This is kind of a weird movie. Not weird. This is actually just a very thoroughly good and well-made movie. It's actually hard for me to really put my finger on who I would say the audience for this is. It's just a good drama. And for me, what really carries it in is Nicolas Cage's performance, because you get to see him do something he has not really done before, and he's still being very Nick Cage throughout.
No, I agree with pretty much everything on that. Like, yeah, I'm not sure exactly who I would personally recommend this movie to, but if you're a fan of, good dramas, if you're a fan of like sort of smaller, low budget independent films from, maybe newer directors, you just want to see a movie where, if you're a Nick Cage fan and you maybe just know Nick Cage from some of his more iconic roles or maybe some of his more like freak out roles and you just want to
more outlandish roles.
Yeah, and if you just want to see Nick Cage in like just a really solid performance where he's just fucking acting, and people all the time are like, oh, Nick Cage meme actor or whatever, and you want to show people who he can be. If you want
proof, yeah, exactly, of who he can be and what he's capable of as a serious actor, this movie's a great movie to start with.
Absolutely, 100%. If you are a Portlander, I would 100% recommend this movie too, because there's a lot of locations in this movie that you can just basically go to as a Portlander that are not very hard to get to.
Yeah, there's probably pig tours by now.
I would bet. I know they showed, is that the Broadway Bridge? Yeah. When they're going into Portland? So I saw that one. And I think when they're driving into Portland for the first time, they go through a tunnel. I believe that's right around where Pittock Mansion. I believe that's right around there.
Yeah, that sounds right. You've been there, right?
I've been to Pittock Mansion twice, actually.
Yeah, Pittock's pretty fun.
It is. I mean, it's hard to walk up it, I'll be honest with you. You have to like walk up like a fucking hour-long hill to get to this damn house. But it is a great view, I will say. It's a fantastic view.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
But yeah, so with that all out of the way, let's get into our pluggables. So you can follow me at Carlos Chantor on twitter.com. That's the only social media plug I'm going to do for this week. But you can follow us on Spotify as well. We upload every episode to both YouTube and Spotify at the same time. So please follow us on both. Millennials Are Old Podcast on both YouTube and Spotify. And as well, as of last week, the GoFundMe for Lucifer and the Father sequel is up. There used to be was it the Indiegogo? But now it's a GoFundMe, which could theoretically go on forever. So if you're listening to this episode, chip in $9. They're asking for $9 this time, not even $10. So if you want to chip in 9 whole dollarinos, which I believe is now way less than a foot-long Subway sandwich. So if you want to pay the equivalent of a 10-inch Subway sandwich.
There are a couple of great independent filmmakers that are making a really ambitious film. They've both been friends to the show. Scott's been a great friend to the show. Please check out the Lucifer and the Father pilot and give him some love if you think it looks cool. Or even that's like, if you think Scott's because he's a pretty cool guy, then I would say throw him a bone.
100%, absolutely. So yes, those are my pluggables. Brian, do you have any pluggables?
Continue to find us, the Millennials Are Old Pod account on Instagram, one word, just Millennials Are Old Pod, and the Facebook page, which again, just called Millennials Are Old. I'm going to reach out to an admin of a page for an upcoming episode. I don't know when it will be, because I have some prep work that I got to get ready. I'm going to say again, follow that Billy Shack group. There's a guy in there going crazy.
Oh, really? Yes.
Yeah, there's like a guy who keeps posting, like once a week, he will post like a right-wing, like politician that he likes from his local area, and then he'll be like, what do you guys all think that Tom would think of this guy? And then everyone shouts him down, and then he goes quiet for a little bit and just acts normal and then tries it again.
They go like, hey, here's a local councilman, Hitler Mussolini. Like, what do you think of this guy?
I mean, the last guy he posted was a very shitty, like a guy in a very outwardly xenophobic, anti-immigrant, like scaremonger. And he was like, what do you, and then when people were like, hey, I don't think Tom would like this. I think this is bullshit. He was like, well, that's your opinion. And I think ultimately Tom would believe that everyone is entitled to our opinions.
That rocks. That fucking rocks. What a fucking weirdo.
Yeah, actually, this dead guy who believed in the exact opposite of everything I believe in probably would agree with me.
Yeah. Oh God, Jesus Christ! But yeah, I will definitely follow that. If you want to like post some screenshots or
Yeah.
whatever, I will
Let,
fucking laugh really hard at him.
let me find some screen caps of him. I think he's gone now. He gets in a fight and then he leaves for a while.
Ah, Jesus Christ! But yeah, so do you have any other pluggables, Brian?
No, I don't. Just follow Millennials Are Old Pod on Instagram. You always get to see what stupid song I attach to the new episode. Or on Facebook, where I'm curating a long list of boomer pop culture groups. If you do follow, be nice to them. They're mostly nice people. But boy, they're bad at the internet.
And speaking of people who are bad at the internet, I think it's time for us to be bad at sleeping because I'm a terrible sleeper, but I'm going to try to go to bed. So have a good night, everybody. Have a good night, Brian.
Good night, Taylor.